Now, job creation has become a national imperative. That's as South Africa's unemployment rate soars to 29%. But how is this to be actually done? One expert says the answer lies in employment rather than employer or employee-friendly labor laws. Thabang Rapuleng is the Employment Practice Director at Cliff Decker Hoffmeyer, and he joins me now. Thabang, good morning. Good to have you with us.
Good morning, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Now, just referring to a recent interview you conducted, you say that the country's current labor model is inadequate to address joblessness. Just explain that to us.
Yes, Tony, I think we need to accept that what we have been doing up to this point is not yielding the desired result. One has to look at the latest jobless numbers, 29%, the highest in 11 years. It surely points that the internal policies that we've been doing that we've been implementing are not yielding that result. And one calls for, I think the situation calls for now a review of how we've been looking at it, and even a review of the labor market, the regulations that we currently have within the labor market. One will need to review them. Obviously, government alone cannot be seen to be reviewing the labor legislation. It will call for an accord between government, labor, and business to all come together and say, what can be done to make sure that whilst on the one hand guarding against the exploitation of workers, on the other hand we don't alienate investment, and what can be done to change the laws. One has to accept that we've got one of the best employment legislation in the world, actually. But the question is, do we need to be the best, taking into account our current situation?
Okay. So when you look at the labor itself, we've got very, very strong unions in the country. You're saying the unions must actually work together with government to find a solution, but the unions will say, listen, all we're worried about is our people being employed. We're worried about the retrenchments. I mean, what part can they play? What can they come to government and say?
Obviously, the unions are the voice of the workers. No changes can ever be effective without them at least buying into those changes. But at the same time, we need to accept that the unions, as much as they're not the voice of the unemployed, because they represent those who are employed, the decisions that they take within the employment sphere has an impact on the accessibility to the market for the unemployed. Obviously, the higher the threshold to enter the workplace, the more difficult it becomes for employers to employ. So it does have a direct impact on the unemployed. So it's something that the unions will also need to concede on, to say, what do we want to do? Do we want to simply maintain the current rate, which we are actually failing because the economy is shedding jobs as we speak, or do we want to make sure that more and more people can join the employment sector?
We see a lot of labor-related actions in terms of the unions out in the streets. We look at the issues with your Sibanye mines and so forth. If I'm an investor and I'm sitting outside and I'm seeing so much of this instability in terms of the labor force, why would I want to come here? And also another question that goes with that is our labor force too expensive?
Okay. On the first question, and that has to do with the strikes. Now, the right to strike on its own, there is nothing wrong with that right. But the lawlessness that is associated with this right currently, that is something that needs to be looked into. We need the law enforcement agencies to make sure that they can step in without the employers having to now go and approach the labor court and seek an interdict. That's a costly exercise. The moment a strike turns into lawlessness, we need the law enforcement agencies to step in immediately. And on whether or not the labor market is expensive, there's been that argument. There's been an argument that says it's expensive, but that argument thus far has been focusing on saying, when we are talking about the minimum wage, for example. But when one looks at what executives are earning in South Africa, it's high up. They're earning what executives in developed nations are earning. Maybe that's where the argument should also be focusing it.
Okay, so it's also about creating much needed jobs, but it's also about creating much needed skills. Are we on the right track with that?
My sense is that we're not. My sense is that we're still stuck in an economy where you've got your job description, your job profile, and you are skilled according to that particular job description and job profile. And the moment, because of the economic and technological developments, there's changes to what you are currently doing, you find that the labor force, they cannot adapt and do other things. So we are skilled insofar as people are skilled in doing what they are currently doing. But are they skilled in doing what they might be required to do in the future, alternative roles? I don't believe we are.
Okay, and I suppose there's also the question of upskilling when it comes to the companies. Can they afford to do so? But that's where we have to leave it. Thank you so much, Thabang.
Thank you, Tony.
Fantastic. Thabang Rapuleng, Employment Practice Director at Cliff Decker Hofmeyr. Now, the